All right, let's do this. The world prepare for the final journey.
Callus cannot bring to his aid.
So I get one of each slot, right? I mean, the obvious thing is Lion's Heart for the trinket slot. Just pick your favorite weapons, basically. What am I fighting? Enemies are brimstone. Take what you... Just take your best equipment. 16 damage. They won't tell me for some reason because they're dicks. 18 damage. 18 damage. 18 damage. 13 damage. 16 damage. $250% damage. Whereas this one does an AoE. An AoE that does kind of comparable to normal damage, but it's kind of eh. But it's better against armor. It's an armor breaker. That's kind of worth it. I don't know. This is just a standard weapon that has a proper finisher, and it's just like it's just good. I'll take Archer's Bane. What's a good shield? This might just be a boss fight, so I'm just gonna take something that helps in combat. I don't know what some of these cards are. Buckler, add gold, don't care. Armor breaker, it's a basher weapon. That might be the one to go for. It gives you 8 defense and it's bonus against shields. What's going on? Oh, my controller like stopped working for a second? What? Oh, controller unplugged for a moment. Whoops. And it won't register now? It won't register now. Huh. My connection must be getting loose or something. Try this again. This is one of those games where if you plug the controller back in, I guess it doesn't re-register the controller, so... It's kind of like there's some games where if you start a game with the controller not plugged in and you plug it in, it won't suddenly register it. And some games do. Kudos for any game that does, but it's a widespread problem for a lot of games to not register them, so I'm just kind of used to it. Yeah, a lot of map reveal cards and things I don't care about. Shield of the Eagle. 10 health. $20 defense is a lot, but I don't want to go that much slower and start stacking up a bunch of slow things. I'll just take the one that breaks armor. I'm not really sure how this is gonna go. I mean, this is the platinum one, so let's take that one, I guess. And there's Retha's Ire for here. What's Arcane Edge do again? 22 damage, where this is 26. Oops. And it... Oh, it does a damage... It does a percentage of bonus damage as you fill up the weapon charge. So you probably don't want to use the finisher. You probably don't want to use the finisher because there's a damage buff of 30%. Which probably makes it stronger than Retha's Ire, but I could just use Retha's Ire, which comes with, like, actual finishers. Stuff like that. Weave of the Protector. 10% loss of speed. I want to point out they took away the thing where the rest of the game, when you highlight a piece of equipment, when you highlight it, it tells you how much defense or damage the weapon does, like just below it on the bottom. It's just gone now. You have to manually click it. You have to manually check every single item. This is weird. 20 more max life. Every time I lose life, I deal more damage. That's kind of badass. I don't know if it's based on how much life you're currently missing, or just you keep getting stronger every time you take damage. But that'd be really badass, probably. How many hoods do I have that are relevant during combat exactly? This just will give you 5 health once. Not very encouraging. Anti-infected. Yeah, Frontier Barber's still really great. Get a stun from bashing people. Knight's Helm gives defense on all slots though. That's pretty good. It helps cover up for the weaknesses I've got on my other equipment, because it's not all very defensive necessarily. But it's only a minor amount of bonus, but it's alright. I'll go for it.
And thus our carriage arrives at our final destination. Now we will see what changes Callus has wrought, and play the game of life and death in truth.
Hey, there she is. Are you gonna come help me, or are you just gonna sit here?
Didn't think I'd leave you on your own, did you?
Are you coming? Or are you just gonna sit there?
Thought I'd come along and make sure you didn't get too big for your boots. Savior of the world and all that.
Okay, but yeah, get up and come with me. Otherwise you are just leaving me to die. Please come. Why are you sitting there?
Somebody needed to make sure you didn't mess this up.
Hey, the physics turned off on her. That's a reoccurring thing in this game that seems to be a glitch or something, is that beards and pieces of fabric, like the physics turns off and they just go rigid. Like every time an ogre does an animation, his like beard's flopping all over the place like it has physics. Then when he finishes the animation, his beard goes completely rigid. And her sash is sticking perfectly out to the side. I've never noticed it before because the game's always in motion.
You have done well. Let us finish it.
Okay, get up. Come with me. Guys. Guys. Please. Stop being dramatic.
Well, here we are at our final meeting. You expect me to play cards? No, I have devoted my life to battle, and battle it shall be.
Call him a joint. Not really, obviously, but I saw the hexagons and how could I not look at them? Okay, everyone's here at least. Give me that bubble. So it seems to be a repeat of the end of the last game where they have you face off against the 4 primary factions one by one. And then the bad guy, and then you probably fight him between each wave.
Only blood can finish this.
Not alone, we fight together.
Oh, hey, the dealer's here.
Him stunned. Attack.
Hello, dealer. How you doing? Oh, bad. Kadoosh. Ow, that wasn't very nice.
I will not go easily to the next world.
Oh, my weapon automatically changes to whatever weapon you're supposed to use against that faction. I was wondering about that. I took my first hit, you guys. I think. I think that was my first hit. They've conditioned me so much to fight these enemies over and over again over the last mission that of course I'm gonna just be like acing this. Oh, that was a waste.
Finally, a worthy foe.
Nope, I got a hit.
This is to be the final battle. Let them sing our praise when all is done.
Am I knocking the cards out of him? I think I'm knocking the cards out of him. Ow!
I have created is glorious. I have ruled over the ascent of our kind. We dominate them, as we should. You would risk all of this?
I see. He's clearly the protagonist of the first game. I recognize him now. I think I've been beating his armor off, so now I can see what he looks like. Beating his armor off is a really unfortunate way of saying that. So I should have done. I think this is an anti-Empire dagger set, isn't it? I should have used something else probably. Ow. What hit me there? I think did the fire hit me? Oh no, I probably got hit by the lich.
Power is the only game.
I'm just wailing on him.
Focus on Callus while we can.
Yeah, take that first game that I enjoyed more.
You cannot simply take this power. You will be changed by it. You will change the world. It will take your form. I hope you understand what that means. The next era will be marked by those traits you have shown me throughout the game. Persistence, violence, cunning, imagination. I wonder what sort of world I will find when you are done.
Defiant development team. Alright, so that was Hand of Fate 2. It was very long. It was very, very long. That's the primary feeling I get from it. I assume placeholder in that guy's name is a joke because he's programmer. Yeah, my primary takeaway is that the game is way too long. And that's, like, games, there's not a specific length that makes a game too long or too short. It's based on what the content of the game is. And this game didn't have the content, in my opinion, to support its length, and that's a bummer. And it really ran out of steam, and it's just too long. It just keeps going and going, and you've seen all of the tricks that it has to offer for you well before it ends. Like, when I was about halfway through the game, doing like the strength challenge and stuff like that, it kind of felt like the game should be over in a few missions, like back then. Like, that would have been a good time, because when I fought, like, when I doing the strength challenge, I was like, oh man, let's deal with an ogre! Look at this ogre boss fight! And like, I was still seeing new things, and like, okay, cool, every main enemy had like 2 or 3 scenarios that were based around it, basically, and then the game ends with a boss fight. That'd be nice. But the game's twice as long as that. But it's actually exponentially, it's significantly longer than even twice as long as that, because the later cards, the later scenarios often require even more play to figure out how to get them right. But then also they have these companion quest chains and all these other quest chains. It's just, they try to get so much out of it. But the problem is they didn't make enough content for it. And the system they have of fame and gold and money, I mean, and health and food and whatever, can only go so far. And before long, you've seen all the tricks that that system has. And then the enemy pool never grew. Brimstone enemies are not interesting. It's just the same enemy, but harder to tell what they're doing and what they look like because they're splotchy black shapes. But they behave basically identically. Maybe they attack slightly more often, I don't know. But mostly they just take way more longer to kill because they have tons of health, which is never a good thing. To just pad out a fight with tons of health. And, like, the game ran out of mechanics to show me. I'd seen every gambit. I've seen most versions of all gambits. Every now and then, the only surprise is that every now and then I do a precision gambit where the things, like, moved slightly stranger than before. Like, oh man, that precision gambit shaped a little differently than before. Surprise! Like, that would get me a little bit here and there, but it was the same fights over and over again. And the same levels over and over again. And the levels mostly don't matter because the levels are just a shape, mostly just a square that you fight in. Sometimes it's like a wobbly square, sometimes it's a slightly narrower square. There's no hazards in the levels, there's no environmental things going on in the levels that affect the fight in any way. There are no traps in the levels that you have to avoid or maybe even use against your enemies. They only flirt with the idea of mixing enemies and traps once with that one skeleton thing I saw, and that was it for the entire game. And now I was so baffled by that, because traps were in the other game all the time. There'd be like a part of the level that like shoots arrows, and they'd be like, that part is like a mine or like a bear trap. So you could like if you were careless, you'd get hit by it, but if you were smart, you could lure the enemy into getting hit by it, and then that'd be like a free hit against the enemy and stuff like that. Like there was more. In some ways, there was more tactical stuff going on in the first game, in the combat. I think they added other stuff because I don't remember if finishers were in the first game or not. The combo, your combo thing you build up and then attack with. I don't remember if that was in the first game or not, and I don't remember if artifacts were in the first game or not. I think no, they were. I think I remember artifacts. Yeah, I had one that shot blades out in a circle that was just like my cardinal blade. I think that used to be an artifact, wasn't it? So I think artifacts were in the last game, but like traps were in the last game, and they're just gone. Like why does the combat have less variety than the previous game, but they wanted to make you string it out for like 2-3 times as long? That's excessive. That's brutal to make it that much longer. I don't need that. That's the main thing, is like I like the idea of their game, and I enjoyed the fact that they switched it up by making the dungeons a bit more like situational. Like now there's like a whole theme and stuff like that. So like the board would be shaped different, and there was like an intro and special characteristics. Like stuff like strength is interesting. Like, oh, by the way, you can't heal by eating food, and your health is short. Like, those types of scenarios are what makes the game interesting, but the game started to really lose steam in some parts of it, like especially the final real mission, which is, it gives you no new ideas really besides pick the right companion at the right time. Aside from that, it's mostly just recycled content for hours. Just a brutal gauntlet of doing the same fight over and over again. And now they're Brimstone, which doesn't make them harder, it just makes them harder to kill because their health is larger. And then you'll take one more step and do the same fight again, and then you take another step and do the same fight again. And it's like there's almost no story context. All you're doing, there's not much story development going on because you're running away from your assassination you just did. The only cool thing is that yes, you're getting like a Mass Effect style, like finishing the character arc of each character thing, which I appreciate. But I think that these characters getting paid off by a final mission, I feel like they deserved a better mission. Like the suicide mission in Mass Effect had more to offer than I think this mission did at the end of this game. And then it all builds up to a final boss fight where you just fight a dude for a while, and I'm not sure if that's even... I guess the idea is that this whole game, you're just supposed to build up the best equipment you can find, so then Callus can be defeated by the equipment you found. So I guess that's the power of the deck or something? It feels weird to justify the idea that this entire game happened and we were slowly building up all this crazy stuff because we needed to defeat Callus, and because he was so powerful. But he was just some schmuck you could easily defeat with starter gear, because he's super easy. Callus is not difficult. Your gear doesn't really help you that much in the fight. You could just breeze through that fight with rusty gear and it wouldn't be a problem. And he's the final boss of the entire game, and that speaks to the lack of mechanical depth that the fights have. And it's kind of a bummer that they, like, when you do a final boss of a fight of an RPG, or just most games in general, you're usually culminating a bunch of the different mechanics that the game was using up until that point, and a final, like, tour de force of everything this game had to offer. And that's a problem with both Hand of Fates, is that their final fight throws most of the mechanics of the game out the window, because the final fight is not a tabletop thing at all. It's just a Batman fight, and that's it. And it's a really easy Batman fight, because you're only fighting enemies you fought before, plus one enemy that largely behaves just like enemies you've seen before. I think the dealer was weirder, if I remember correctly. I think you actually hit the dealer. He was like a giant, and you'd hit him and stuff. It was weird. I don't exactly remember. I think you dodged stuff or something. It's been a while. But this guy, Callus, he's basically just a knight. And you fought plenty of knights before. They're not a big deal. There was a whole scenario where the boss was a knight. And Callus functionally is not any different from every knight you fought up until that point. So you're not culminating anything. He's not fresh or interesting. But also, the game isn't supposed to be about the combat. That is not the point of Hand of Fate as a series, is the Batman combat. That has never been the core of the franchise. That's just been one of the many mini-games. You do a gambit here, you do a dice roll here, you draw a card here, you do a little fight here, you dodge some traps here. Those are all different ways of different little skill checks. The combat is supposed to be basically the equivalent of rolling the dice. It's another mini game that's like, oh, it's a little risk reward, and that's it. It's supposed to be one tool in the arsenal, and that's it. It's not supposed to be the core. But both games end in a fight, and that's it. Like, the final boss fight of both Hand of Fate 1 and Hand of Fate 2 literally does not have a level where you put cards on a table and, like, solve a level, which is what they're supposed to be. Instead, you just fight, and that's it. And that's never been the fun part of the game. It's never been the core of the game. And so it feels like a mechanical failure to have the climax, the final confrontation of the entire game, be exclusively the weakest part of the game and nothing else. It would be like as if you played a big tabletop game for like 8 hours, let's say Twilight Imperium, because that's an actual thing that I do, and then out of nowhere, at the end of the game, instead of all your victory points mattering, or like the strategies that you and everybody else has laid down for the last 8 hours of playing Twilight Imperium, instead it's just, you just roll dice, and whoever had the highest dice roll wins. You know what I mean? Because like, there's mechanics in Twilight Imperium where you'll roll the dice to determine something, but that's in a specific context of just the one thing. It isn't the culmination of the entire game, so you would never decide the entire game on, hey, let's just roll some dice at the end. That's not it. You're not respecting what the whole game was until that point. It's a very, like, it just feels kind of thoughtless. Like they just end the game the way that video games end, which is most video games end with a boss fight. But this game isn't that kind of game, and so it feels like they contradict that. That's my basic ideas. Combat's it's still not good. It's loose, it's unreliable, it doesn't have mechanical depth, it doesn't really go anywhere. And if you've been watching, you probably don't understand the struggle I've been going throughout the game necessarily about why it's so finicky and weird, but like, when there's a large number of enemies, you cannot pick an enemy to attack. Because your character, this is Batman combat or Assassin's Creed combat, which you'll probably remember most games of Assassin's Creed and Batman, you usually fight like maybe 5 dudes in a lot of cases. Usually not this kind of huge number of dudes, because those games have loose targeting systems. Although Assassin's Creed kind of has a better targeting system, because in Assassin's Creed you can manually move your camera. Batman usually pulls the camera back up in the air. Assassin's Creed you can actually, if I remember correctly, manually turn it around, which means you have more control than you normally do. I would say Dark Souls is peak levels of control, because in Dark Souls, you can click the right stick to lock onto an individual enemy, then you can press left or right on the right stick to change enemies, or you could just not lock onto anyone, point the camera at a dude, and just attack, and you'll attack in that direction. Like, that's complete control of your attacking. Monster Hunter has that. Monster Hunter has that too. In this game, no. You have a vague suggestion. You just press the joystick vaguely towards a dude, and I can't even imagine what it's like for keyboard and mouse players trying to WASD it around. You have less directions than I do, because my joystick has way more directions than a WASD does, which WASD at most has 8. It's WASD plus, you know, each combination of 2 for diagonals. There's more than 8 directions on a joystick, so I have way more control, and even I can't control who I'm attacking, because I'll just gesture towards a dude, and it's like, okay, hit that shaman, because that shaman is healing everyone, or that lich is draining my health. No, I'm gonna hit this archer. And like, no, that's the guy standing next to him. Hit the other guy. It's like, nah, I'm gonna hit the archer. And like, I'll do like a 5-hit combo on the wrong guy, because I keep trying to change to the right dude, and he won't change to that dude. But also, it's such a simplistic symbol of like system of like B is dodge and Y is counter a green attack. But then the game gets that wrong, because a green attack and a red attack can happen at the same time, and then that means if you hit Y, you'll get hit by the red attack, and if you hit dodge, you get hit by the green attack, unless the heart of the cards line up and you magically don't get hit somehow, which is just terrible. And the camera's way too close, and you have zero control of the camera. Doing the right joystick generally literally does nothing. So if there's guys off camera who are attacking you, and the notification system isn't properly showing that they're attacking you, you just get surprised by shit, because the camera doesn't even show the fight that's happening. And it's like, the whole thing is just a weird, like, nightmare mess. And also, it's hard to explain exactly, but like in Dark Souls, for example, when you do an attack, your attack always starts at the same time and has the same duration and ends at the same time, and like, that's what your attack arc is, right? But this game's unreliable, because your character, when you press the attack button, he begins an animation. And once he begins that animation, he locks onto a specific target, runs to that target, then begins the attack, and he will continue the attack in an uncancelable fashion until he finally finishes it, which is a nightmare, because some attacks happen instantaneously, some attacks are like an ordeal where your character is going to go on a journey before he does the attack, so you have massively inconsistent time to attack whenever you press the button, which is a nightmare, because oftentimes your attack will get so long in some cases that it's longer than the entire enemy's attack. So there's moments where your enemy can blindside you with a thing before you got a chance to do anything to him. And it's like, it's just a weird mess. It's just a nightmare. But despite these difficulties don't really... The problem with these challenges is that they're not interesting challenges that are a result of mechanical depth. Like, in a lot of cases when I get hit or something bad happens in like Monster Hunter World, like, there was ways to prevent that, and there are mechanics that I can learn that keep going forward. But this game is incredibly mechanically shallow in its combat, and you've basically seen all of its combat within a few hours, and then you just keep playing for dozens of hours after that, and the combat never changes and never advances, and it never feels different, and there's no more stuff to plumb out of that. There's no more mechanical depth to experience there, and you quickly realize that some of the stuff that happens to you is just a limitation of the game, which is concerning because it's the second one and they still haven't improved. And honestly, I kind of was hoping that they wouldn't even use the Batman combat, but replace it with something completely different. But they didn't, unfortunately. And the best you can do then is, if you're going to use this not great combat, is just, you know, use it as one tool on the belt. So it's really disappointing that the penultimate mission was non-stop combat with almost nothing else going on and no interesting decisions to be made, really, for the most part. And then the final thing is just a boring fight that's over almost immediately. I'm pretty done with this game. That's all I really have to say. I don't begrudge you if you like it or anything like that, but I think that a lot of my criticisms are pretty apt, generally. In this case, I think that a lot of this stuff is true. I think it has pacing problems. I think it's too long. I think some of its mechanics aren't as good as they should be. And you've also heard plenty of other things over the course of the playthrough. So, yeah. I'm done for now. Will I come back and get the good ending? Maybe. I'm rather not into it, frankly. So here's my board, right? Oh yeah, let's do this thing real quick. For defeating Callus, Callus's ring. For being the tool of his vengeance, you receive The dealer. So now the dealer's a companion, and then that's gold. So I have 2 scenarios left. Yeah, that. Wow, you really can't see the moment where I turned on the game. I was like, up until now, I was like, yeah, this game has problems, but I'm like, yeah, it's fine, all the way up to the wheel and stuff. And then Justice, I was like, this scenario kind of sucks. And then I was like, I don't even really want to gold that. I don't want to go back ever again. And from then on, like, some of them were all right, but generally, I was like, it was going downhill the moment we got on the second half of that screen, basically. So in order to get the good ending, you have to gold every scenario and platinum every character. Well, plot twist, I just looked it up, and I got the good ending. People said that you needed to gold everything to get the good ending, but you actually just need to platinum the companions, and that's it. So that was the good ending, that's all that happens. And I did it. So if I golded the other, if I golded the other 2 scenarios, I'd be doing it just for the sake of it, and I don't want to, so I'm not going to. Yeah. Thanks for watching like always. Thanks for putting up with my bitching, I guess. You got this far, so you must be into that, I guess. Otherwise, why did you make it this far in the series? I don't wish the developer ill will. I hope Hand of Fate 3 is better. I liked the first one significantly more because it didn't have such excessive pacing issues. And my advice to all developers of all scales, anyone, as if they're listening, make a game with a length that matches the scale of its content. Mass Effect 1 is fantastic. Mass Effect Andromeda is a garbage fire. Because they had like 5 enemies and like 4 levels, and they're like, hey, play this for 70 hours, whereas Mass Effect 1 was over in like 20 hours or less, because they made a game to the scale of the content they had. This shit's excessive, man. And I'm terrified of the idea of DLC unless they add actual content and not just more remixes of the same content, because the idea that the game is twice as long as the first game, but has the same number of enemies and stuff like that, like the same... It has the same, number of races and stuff like that, and like maybe it has like another tier of enemies per team or something, but it's like, it's not... They need exponentially more content to justify this length, in my opinion. Anyway, we're gonna talk in circles at this point. Thanks for watching like always, guys. See you next time. Sorry if you're disappointed. And we'll be playing another game tomorrow.